On April 9, 2016, a chilling call shocked the Renton Police Department. The remains of a woman's body, Ingrid Line, were found in a white trash bag. The discovery included a severed arm, a detached head, and a sliced-off leg. Investigators began their search for answers, leading them to a suspect. What dark secrets would they uncover in their pursuit of justice? Let's go back to the beginning. Ingrid Ronceville, a lively individual, was born on August 2, 1975 in Arizona. She graduated from Canyon del Oro High School in Tucson in 1993 and pursued nursing, earning a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from the University of Arizona in 1997. In 2000, Ingrid moved to Washington, where she worked at Seattle's Swedish Medical Center, positively impacting many lives. She married Philip Line and had 3 daughters, Reese, Brooke, and Noelle. After divorcing Philip in 2014, Ingrid moved to Renton with her daughters to start a new chapter. As a single mother, she faced challenges but was devoted to her children's happiness. In 2016, Ingrid was living in Renton with her daughters, aged 6, 8, and 10. Despite the divorce, Ingrid and Philip remained in touch for their daughter's sake. The divorce left Ingrid feeling broken, longing for love and respect she missed in her previous marriage. During this challenging period, Ingrid, a 40-year-old woman, found solace in an online connection she made through a dating site. Their conversations provided her with comfort, momentarily alleviating her pain and giving her a sense of love. This individual made her feel beautiful and accepted her, despite the fact that she already had 3 daughters. It was like a dream come true for Ingrid, signifying the start of a new chapter in her life. On April 8, 2016, after a month of online communication, Ingrid took a leap of faith and agreed to meet this person for a date. It was her way of embracing the possibility of moving forward. Ingrid entrusted her daughters to her ex-husband's care, assuring them that she would take them out the following day. Ingrid and her date decided to attend the opening game of the Seattle Mariners, an exhilarating baseball event. After the game, they went to a bar where the man's sister happened to work. They spent the evening happily playing darts, sharing drinks and laughing together. Ingrid felt an overwhelming sense of happiness and freedom. The next day, on April 9, 2016, Philip, Ingrid's ex-husband, arrived at her home in Renton around 10 a.m. to drop off their daughters. As he approached the house, he noticed that Ingrid's 2015 silver Toyota Highlander was missing. Concerned, he repeatedly knocked on the door, but received no response. He tried calling her multiple times, but Ingrid did not answer any of his calls. This was unusual because Ingrid was known for never breaking promises, especially when it came to her daughters. Philip couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Growing increasingly worried, he decided to contact Ingrid's mother, Jorga Boss, hoping she might have some information about Ingrid's whereabouts. However, Jorga was also concerned when she learned that Ingrid was not at home, as she had no idea where Ingrid could be. Filled with anxiety, Jorga hurried to Ingrid's house, armed with a spare key. She utilized it to gain entry into the residence and called out for Ingrid, yet there was no reply. Alarmed, Jorga proceeded upstairs to inspect Ingrid's bedroom, only to discover that Ingrid was not there. However, she did stumble upon Ingrid's purse and phone on the table. There was no trace of Ingrid or her car. The situation appeared peculiar and suspicious. It didn't make sense for Ingrid to leave the house without her phone and purse if she had indeed departed. After all, most individuals wouldn't leave their homes without money or a means of communication. This raised even more inquiries and concerns about Ingrid's whereabouts. Without wasting any time, Jorga promptly contacted the police and reported her daughter as missing. Upon arrival at Ingrid's residence in Renton, the Renton Police Department officers were met by Jorga, whose tear-filled eyes conveyed her distress. Initially, the police attempted to console Jorga, suggesting that Ingrid may have gone out and would return soon. However, Jorga's intuition told her otherwise. She had a gut feeling that something was wrong. Determined to locate her daughter, she implored the police to conduct a thorough investigation. The police wasted no time, commenced a meticulous door-to-door inquiry, interrogating the neighbors in hopes of uncovering any leads. They diligently questioned the neighbors, inquiring if they had witnessed Ingrid entering her house the previous night or leaving in the morning. One neighbor had an intriguing account to share. He disclosed that he had seen Ingrid returning home with an unfamiliar man the previous night. The man appeared suspicious, as the neighbor had never seen him before. What perplexed everyone was the fact that no one had observed Ingrid leaving her house thereafter. The question lingered: who was this man? And if Ingrid had returned home but was not seen leaving, where could she possibly be? The police urged individuals to reflect on any unusual incidents they may have noticed the night before or that morning. They encouraged anyone with information to come forward, as it could be crucial in locating Ingrid. The daughters were growing increasingly concerned upon seeing the police inquire about their mother. They turned to Jorga, their grandmother, for answers. They inquired about their mother's well-being, but Jorga reassured them, explaining that she had simply gone out and would be back soon. The police assured Jorga that they would investigate the situation. Jorga anxiously awaited her daughter's return, and suddenly a realization dawned on her. Jorga remembered that she and Ingrid shared a Verizon account, which provides access to various services like phone plans and internet. Intrigued, she checked the phone records and noticed a recurring number that Ingrid had been in contact with, even on the day she disappeared. Jorga decided to dig deeper and input the number into Facebook. To her surprise, a profile belonging to a man named John Charlton popped up. Filled with hope, she messaged him, desperately seeking any information about Ingrid's whereabouts. The response was prompt. "I'm John. I assume she was with her children today," John replied. Jorga quickly responded, her hands shaking as she typed. "When was the last time you saw her? She wasn't here. Her phone, driver's license, and purse were all left behind, but she's gone. I've contacted 911 for assistance." John's reply conveyed confusion. 911? What's going on? He elaborated. "We attended the Mariners game last night, but we didn't spend the night together because she had plans with her kids today. I'm not sure what she told you about me and our relationship." Fear gripped Jorga as she messaged back. "She's missing. Can you please provide the time you last saw her? The authorities need to speak with you, as you might be the last person to have seen her." At that moment, it became evident to Jorga that Ingrid had indeed gone on a date with John Charlton the previous evening. It appeared probable that he was the same individual the neighbor had witnessed accompanying Ingrid back to her residence. With a mixture of concern and optimism, Jorga realized that John might possess some knowledge regarding Ingrid's whereabouts. However, John remained silent, leaving Jorga in a state of anxiety and desperation for answers. She persisted in sending him messages pleading, "John, please call me. I am aware that your name is John Charlton, so kindly reach out to me." With each passing moment, the burden of uncertainty grew heavier. Jorga could not bear the thought of her daughter disappearing without a trace. She persevered, hoping for any lead, and messaged him once again. "John, did Ingrid mention anything about meeting someone after you parted ways last night? We cannot locate her or her vehicle. Her phone, identification, and purse are at home, but she and her car have vanished. We are at our wits' end, desperate for any assistance." Ingrid would never simply abandon her family like this. Nevertheless, John remained silent and did not respond to any of the messages. Jorga felt a sense of helplessness and tears streamed down her face. The situation escalated when, 6 hours after Ingrid was reported missing, around 4 p.m., the police received a disturbing call from an individual named Mike Novasio. Mike resided approximately 10 miles away from Ingrid's residence at 21st Avenue and East Rhine Street in Seattle. In a frightened tone, he conveyed that while taking out his recycling bin, he stumbled upon what appeared to be human body parts enclosed in white trash bags. Mike's voice quivered as he recounted his unsettling encounter. He described seeing a head and noticing the painted toenails, which caused a wave of sickness to wash over him. The sight was unbearable. He explained that the body parts had been meticulously wrapped in the bags, indicating a disturbing level of precision. The police wasted no time and promptly arrived at the location. With meticulous care, they retrieved the bags from the bins. As the bags were opened, a chilling shock fell upon them. They stumbled upon a decapitated head, a fragment of a leg and an arm, with the remaining body parts nowhere to be found. Due to the absence of decomposition, the facial features remained intact and recognizable, suggesting that the individual had been recently murdered. A human leg was discovered at a recycling plant on South Hanford Street in Seattle. Leg belonged to a woman with the same painted toenails as Ingrid. This indicated that Ingrid's body parts had been scattered across 3 different locations, including the easily accessible recycling bins. The police began to suspect that the perpetrator might not be a serial killer, as they typically dispose of bodies in more concealed locations. Instead, they started considering the possibility that the culprit could be someone close to Ingrid. Determined to uncover any overlooked evidence, the police returned to Ingrid's home and decided to remove the plumbing for a thorough examination. Upon their surprise, they stumbled upon more blood in the disassembled drain trap. To aid their investigation, they employed a reagent known as Blue Star, which unveiled additional traces of blood that had been meticulously cleaned. It was clear that this was not a spur-of-the-moment act of violence, was a meticulously planned and executed murder, introducing a captivating twist to the case. As the results from the analysis came in, more unsettling details about Ingrid's demise surfaced. Initially deemed as homicidal violence, a closer examination by the medical examiner revealed petechiae, small blood vessels in her eyes indicating strangulation. Furthermore, signs of hemorrhaging on the neck were found. It was apparent that Ingrid was first strangled and then dismembered within her own residence. The revelation shed light on the brutal way Ingrid's life was taken, hinting at a deep-seated animosity towards her. The toxicology report disclosed that Ingrid had no drugs in her system, but her blood alcohol level was 0.074, slightly above the normal range. 2 days later, on April 20th, 2016, authorities located Ingrid's vehicle in Belltown, a mere 6-minute drive from Seattle. This raised suspicions, as John had claimed Ingrid dropped him off downtown and should have returned home before her murder. The abandonment of her car so close to Seattle, where they had attended a Seattle Mariners game together, seemed peculiar. Law enforcement meticulously combed through the entire vehicle and made a chilling discovery. The same white trash bags containing Ingrid's dismembered body parts were found inside the car. Additionally, 3 fingerprints were found on the driver's door handle of the vehicle. These prints were crucial, as they could belong to Ingrid, given that the car was hers, or they could belong to the perpetrator who had driven her car to that location. Realizing the significance of this evidence, the fingerprints were promptly sent for testing. The findings confirmed the suspicions of the police. The fingerprints were a match for John Charlton, the individual Ingrid had gone out with on the evening she went missing. It became apparent that John's statements during the interrogation were all calculated tactics to mislead the authorities. Despite initially claiming to be intoxicated and unaware of the events that transpired that night, the meticulous planning and execution of the crime, coupled with the thorough cleaning of the residence to eliminate any traces of evidence, indicated that John acted with full consciousness and possessed a clear motive for murdering Ingrid. The police recollected that during the questioning, John had mentioned staying with his former girlfriend. In their pursuit of gathering more information about John, the police exerted significant efforts to locate and interview his ex-girlfriend, ensuring her identity remained undisclosed for privacy concerns. During the interview, she disclosed that John, who worked as a day laborer, typically spent his nights at a shelter in Seattle, except for a few nights each week when he stayed at her place. They had known each other for approximately a year, and she permitted him to store some of his belongings at her residence. Interestingly, she informed the police that John was supposed to visit her on the Saturday morning of April 9, 2016, the day after his encounter with Ingrid. However, he arrived later than planned, citing an unforeseen circumstance. She revealed that he arrived at the bus station in Lake Stevens around 10:30 p.m., and she immediately noticed that he had a swollen and injured lip. When questioned about it, John claimed that he had been the victim of an attempted robbery at a bar despite still having his wallet. This particular detail captured the attention of the police. When they interrogated John on April 11, 2016, they observed abrasions on his head, chin, and scratches on his chest and arms. These injuries appeared to align with the unsettling possibility that they may have been inflicted during the struggle between John and Ingrid when he strangled her. It seemed as though she had put up a strong fight, leaving her mark on him in a desperate bid to defend herself. The police acted swiftly without hesitation, taking John into custody and charging him with the murder of Ingrid Line. John Robert Charlton was born in 1979 in Washington to Ray and Joan Charlton. At 37 years old, he had a history of encounters with the law. His past included a misdemeanor assault conviction in King County in 1997, indicating a propensity for aggression. Additionally, he had a history of negligent driving in Washington state in 1998. In 2006, he faced charges of attempted aggravated robbery in Utah. It appeared that he was no stranger to trouble. In 2008, he was found guilty of felony theft in Montana. Moreover, records showed a misdemeanor battery case in Idaho in 2009, hinting at a pattern of violent behavior. These prior run-ins with the law added a layer of complexity to John's character and raised suspicions about his potential involvement in serious crimes. John's turbulent past extended beyond his criminal record. Troubling incidents involving his parents shed light on his volatile behavior. In 2006, John's parents sought protection from him, citing concerns for their safety. They recounted his drunken outbursts and expressed fear for their well-being. Court documents detailed a disturbing incident on March 2, 2006, when John, under the influence of alcohol, turned physically and verbally abusive towards his parents. During that episode, John allegedly took the movie Hannibal from a shelf in the house and placed it in front of his mother, warning her to watch it and be cautious. According to his parents, John held grudges for years, and his conduct grew increasingly menacing and violent when under the influence of alcohol or drugs. They also suspected his use of crack cocaine. Although the request for the protection order was eventually dismissed, these occurrences painted a troubling picture of John's unstable and aggressive tendencies. John initially denied any knowledge of Ingrid's fate, but eventually changed his plea to guilty before the trial began. The prosecution presented a compelling case in court alleging that John had murdered Ingrid inside her own home. Shockingly, it was revealed that John had driven through downtown Seattle disposing of Ingrid's body parts in various trash cans. The medical examiner's report confirmed that Ingrid's death was a result of violent homicide. In response, the defense argued that there was a lack of forensic evidence linking anyone, including their client, to Ingrid's murder. They urged the community not to rush to conclusions during this tragic event. However, all the evidence seemed to point towards John's involvement. The prosecutor, Dan Satterberg, acknowledged that there were still unanswered questions surrounding the motive behind Ingrid's murder. Nevertheless, he praised the diligent work of the police and prosecutors in gathering evidence to build a strong case against the person they believed was responsible for her death. It was a challenging task, but their dedication paid off in delivering justice for Ingrid. John was sentenced to a maximum of 27 years and 9 months in prison in accordance with the state's guidelines. However, Judge Julie Spector presiding over the case in King County Superior Court expressed her strong condemnation, stating that if she had the authority, she would have given him a life sentence. She described his actions as unimaginably vicious and cruel. During the sentencing hearing, John addressed the court and Ingrid's grieving family, acknowledging the immense pain he had caused and expressing genuine remorse. Ingrid's ex-husband, Philip, spoke about the profound loss caused by John's actions, highlighting how John had not only taken away a co-parent and confidant, but also a loving and caring mother to their daughters. Philip expressed his sorrow over the fact that the children would no longer have the guidance and wisdom of Ingrid as a mother figure. He mentioned that they would miss out on cherished traditions such as celebrating July 4th in Big Fork, Montana, going on beach trips, and enjoying Thursday night dinners at a steakhouse. Additionally, Philip shared the heartbreaking realization that their future grandchildren would never experience the love and care of a maternal grandmother. Despite their resilience, Philip acknowledged that their daughters deeply feel the absence of their mother every day, each in their own unique way. Ingrid's close friend, Nancy Civitilli, described the indescribable horror that engulfed everyone upon hearing about Ingrid's tragic death. She emphasized that the murder was not just an act of violence, but a violation of Ingrid's body, leaving behind an unimaginable aftermath. Savitili did not hold back in calling John a coward, directly addressing him and reminding him of the profound impact his actions had on Ingrid's daughters. She pointed out how he selfishly tore away a beautiful person and a devoted mother from their lives. Savitili also highlighted the loss felt by friends like herself, who considered Ingrid as a sister. While justice has been served, the scars of this tragedy will forever remain. Today, we're going back to 2014 to Indianapolis, the most populated city in the state of Indiana. Busy and bustling all the time and home to almost 900,000 people, two of which were 24-year-old Nathan Benjamin Trapisano and his wife Jennifer. Nathan was from a big and close family, being the fourth of 5 children, and his brother said even though Nathan was younger than him, he looked up to him so much. Nathan had always excelled in academics, music, and athletics. He had a black belt in karate and played piano and violin as well. He was witty and clever, but always remained humble and gracious. He gained a place at Ball State University where he was working on getting a degree in Latin, Greek, and classical studies, and it was here that he met his future wife Jennifer, who was training to be a nurse. The pair were inseparable and had a lot in common, both sharing the same morals and values and very strong in their Catholic faith. Jennifer said she loved his quirkiness and how smart he was, always making her laugh and challenging her to push herself in every aspect of her life. The couple eventually moved to Indianapolis when Nathan got a job as a computer programmer at Ivy Tech Community College. Jennifer was still doing her training when they both found out they were going to be parents. They were over the moon when they discovered they were having a little girl, and they knew her name right away, Cecilia Marie. Flash forward a few months. It was now coming to the end of March 2014, and Nathan and Jennifer were busy planning. They had a lot of exciting and special days coming up. Cecilia was due in just a few weeks. Their first wedding anniversary was on May 11th, and a week after this was Nathan's 25th birthday. Safe to say there was a lot going on for the young couple, but nothing was more exciting for Nathan than becoming a father. He couldn't wait to meet his daughter. On the 1st of April 2014, Nathan was up early as normal. Having always been really active, he made sure he got a long walk or a run in every day. He normally worked out in the evenings, but he had recently decided to change up his routine so he could be at home with Jennifer more after he finished work and before bed. Just before 5 a.m. Nathan was getting ready for an hour-long morning walk around the block before the sun rose. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the route he always took. Past the shops he normally walked by on the roads he knew very well. He grabbed his old MP3 player, his headphones and his rosary beads, and quietly left Jennifer asleep. At 5:50 a.m., a resident just a short walk away had a loud popping sound. She looked out of her window to see Nathan collapsing to the ground and shouting for help. She called 911 and ran outside. She said as she got to Nathan, she could see he was only wearing his joggers. He had no shoes and no shirt on. They were just scattered around on the ground. She could see a small bullet wound in his stomach, but noticed there wasn't much blood at this point. Nathan was clearly in shock, but was still conscious and seemed to be fairly alert. However, 5 minutes later, as the ambulance and police arrived on the streets, Nathan's condition started to rapidly deteriorate. He was no longer able to talk, couldn't tell the officers anything, and was gasping for air. They managed to stabilize him, and he was rushed to hospital and straight into emergency surgery. Just after 7 a.m., Jennifer woke up, confused that her husband still wasn't home yet and getting ready for work. His phone was still on the kitchen table, but this wasn't unusual as he made sure not to take anything valuable out with him. She grabbed her coat and started walking the routes he normally took, trying to calm herself down, but deep down knowing something was really wrong. Despite the best efforts of the doctors and surgeons, at 7:40 a.m., 24-year-old Nathan Trapisano died. Jennifer, who was still out walking, turned a corner and saw the yellow tape everywhere and police flooding the street. She hurried over telling them her husband had left for a walk and not come home, and this was right in the middle of his route. But all they could tell her was that there had been an incident. At this point, they didn't know who the victim was as he had no idea on him, so they couldn't give Jennifer any more details. Anxiously, she showed them a picture of Nathan on her phone, asking if this was what he looked like. Officers knew it was the same person and quietly escorted her to one of the police cars to sit her down and tell her the devastating news. Just 5 weeks away from her due date, would then learn that the love of her life was gone. One detective said he had his whole life in front of him, never been in trouble before, never been a problem, was minding his own business, doing what anybody in our community should be able to do, and that is to take a morning walk. Near to where he was found were some shell casings, which matched a .40 caliber gun. Something officers said was an unusual size, and not one they saw a lot. The owner of the tire shop, Jesse, knew Nathan well, and saw him walk past every day, giving him a little wave as he did. After being broken into just a couple of months before, fortunately for the police, he had installed security cameras, which backed onto the parking lot where Nathan was found. The footage was very grainy and blurry, but it had captured everything. Nathan could be seen walking down the road, being followed by someone who later broke into a run to keep up with him. Later on in the clip, police noticed a second person turn up, who appeared to be working with the shooter. The second half of the CCTV, for obvious reasons, has only ever been partially released. At one point, it looked as if Nathan was raising his hands as if to show he was complying and would do whatever they wanted him to. But the pair backed him into the parking lot and Nathan was shot. After Nathan was down, they ran away down the main road. The only witness they had was the woman who had called 911, but by the time she got out there, they were long gone. Things were made even harder when the police started interviewing the residents of the area. They all said that sadly, this was not an uncommon thing to happen. Over the years, their area had gotten so much worse in terms of gun violence, with multiple shootings happening. Someone said there had been a disturbing amount of shootings and murders in the last few months alone. One theory the police had was that it was some kind of gang initiation. But another potential motive, and one they believed was more likely, was that it was a failed attempt at a robbery. Nathan's family said this made it even more senseless, as he made it a point to never go out walking with any money, cards, or his phone. The footage was sent to experts and was able to be enhanced just enough for them to work out the clothing the shooter had on, but apart from that, there was nothing. A week after Nathan had been killed, police finally made a break in the case. As they started looking into any other shootings in the area around the same time, it came to light that just 18 hours after Nathan had died, a 16-year-old called Simeon Raheem Adams, who went by the nickname Red, was taken to hospital in a critical condition with a gunshot wound to the neck. He had shot 3 bullets at a man named Eric, who had fired back at him in self-defense. Simeon was also a suspect in the burglary of a gunshot a week earlier at about 2 a.m., in which 30 firearms were stolen. And at 3 a.m. on April 1st, just 2 hours before Nathan was shot, he and 2 of the men had attempted to steal a car from outside of a strip club, stopped only from doing so when the bouncer caught them. The strip club was less than a mile away from where Nathan had been walking, showing both the shooter and whoever was on lookout in the same clothing. When detectives heard about this, they knew they had to interview Simeon. He was not only confirmed as being in the same location of Nathan's shooting at the same time, he was now also facing arrest for the attempted murder of someone else, and some guns that had been stolen from the shop matched the casings found near Nathan's body. But being in the condition he was in hospital meant they had to reach out to the people in his inner circle first. The more detectives talked to people, the more they kept hearing the nickname Red floating about, linking him to numerous incidents and crimes around the area, and people he knew were picking him out of every picture lineup they showed. Martez McGraw was Simeon's cousin, and he agreed to talk. When he was shown the CCTV footage from outside of the tire shop, he immediately confirmed it was his cousin. He even admitted to being there himself for part of the morning, and confirmed all of Simeon's steps and movements. The other man on the tape was identified and interviewed. After this, police ruled everyone, apart from Simeon, out when it came to Nathan's murder. This was the person they wanted. Martez told police. Simeon ran up to Nathan and ordered him to stop. Simeon then made him walk between the tire shop and the strip club. He made him strip by telling him to take off his shirt. He put his hands in the air and Simeon shot him. Another man also told police he was woken up early on April 1st by Simeon banging on his door. He said he was out of breath, telling him the police were looking for him because he had got into what he referred to as a tussle with someone and shot them. Although doctors were initially skeptical that Simeon would survive, He did and was finally well enough for the police to talk to him. They presented him with everything they knew, and the 16-year-old was subsequently placed under arrest. He would soon be charged as an adult with murder, attempted robbery, and carrying a handgun without a license. Upon hearing that a 16-year-old had been arrested, Jennifer posted to Facebook and said, "I don't know this man's circumstances, but it hurts to hear such a young man could turn to such violence." She asked people to pray for Simeon and Nathan's family, and friends all agreed that Nathan would have forgiven him. Nathan Trapazzano was finally laid to rest, with hundreds in attendance. The investigating officers all showed up too, saying what had happened to him had really struck a nerve with them and that this was a case they would remember for the rest of their lives. And a couple of weeks later, Jennifer gave birth to the couple's daughter, Cecilia Marie. A welcome burst of happiness in such a dark period of time for everyone. Their family said she looked so much like Nathan and was a wonderful, happy, and smiley little girl. As the court proceedings got underway, someone else would gain some attention. Court documents showed that the 16-year-old was free to walk the streets for a month while awaiting a hearing on 13 probation violations. The probation officer had visited his home, but on 9 occasions, Simeon was nowhere to be found. After the 3rd violation, the officer could have asked for an arrest warrant, but for reasons unknown, he didn't. The judge said of this, "I expressed my extreme concern to probation about the handling of this case when I saw there had been 9 house arrest violations. I was very concerned and upset." The probation officer in question would soon resign. Even though he was now 18 and despite being charged as an adult because he was 16 at the time of the murder, prosecutors knew it would have been nearly impossible to get a life in prison sentence for Simeon. However, he was facing 45 to 65 years if found guilty by a jury. In 2015, just over a year after Nathan had died, Simeon Adams pleaded guilty to murder. Simeon's legal team and friends and family commented on his troubled childhood and adolescence, losing his mother to drowning when he was just 13 months old. His dad being in and out of prison for years, he had run-ins with the police that had started at the age of just 10 years old. His uncle who had helped raise him said, "He used to get into trouble, but I didn't think he was capable of this. I used to try to tell him not to hang with the wrong people and to stay on the right path. He listened to me. I would try to keep him in line. And if I told him to do something, he would do it. I would speak to his friends and tell them that if they didn't get themselves together, they would end up dead or in jail. I can't believe he would get involved in something like this." He was frequently shown coming in and out of court laughing. And when it came time for his sentencing, little had changed. The judge addressed him directly, asking him if he appreciated the impact of his actions on the Trapazzano family. He bluntly said, "No, ma'am, and nothing else after this." As part of the plea deal, his potential sentence was reduced and he was handed down 55 years in prison. Under Indiana law, Simeon could be eligible for parole after 27 years, based on credit for good behavior and time already served. If this happens, he will be 45 years old. He was later given a further 12 years in prison in connection with the shooting of Eric, which put him in hospital in the first place. This 12 years is to be served consecutively. The loss of Nathan had a big impact. Everybody rallied behind Jennifer and a GoFundMe was set up to support her, Cecilia, and his family. It reached over $170,000 in donations. Jennifer showed immense strength and motivation to carry on as she would have. And just a year after she lost Nathan, she finished grad school with honors and is now a physician's assistant. The Nathan Trapazzano Memorial Foundation was also set up, and their mission is to offer support and financial relief to children who have lost a parent. They do what they call the Nate Walk, a 5-kilometer walk just as he loved to do, which doubles as a fundraising event. These walks are held once a year in Indianapolis and Pennsylvania, and people can also participate virtually. Ivy Tech Community College, where Nathan worked, said it would grant a full 2-year scholarship to Cecilia if she ever wanted it. Jennifer said time almost stands still and passes quicker than she can keep up with it. Whenever she doubts herself or has a difficult day with Cecilia, she asks Nathan for advice. She said, "Have a voicemail from him on March 31st, 2014. I've listened to it over and over and over again. His voice sounds so familiar still, like it was yesterday. I miss him. I miss everything about him. In so many ways, it feels like he has only been gone for 10 seconds. And yet, it feels like 100 years. On September 12, 1993, the Claps family made preparations for a Sunday getaway at a cozy cottage in Tito, a peaceful town far from their bustling hometown of Potenza, Italy. Accompanied by their parents, Antonio and Filomena, was their 20-year-old son, Luciano. They eagerly awaited the arrival of their eldest son, 24-year-old Gildo Claps, and their younger daughter, 16-year-old Elisa Claps. Plan was for Elisa and her friend, Eliana D. Silas, to attend a church service in the town center before joining the rest of the family for lunch at the cottage. However, as time passed and the girls failed to return, Gildo grew increasingly concerned. Elisa was known for her punctuality and would always inform the family if she was running late. Soon after, Eliana arrived at the door, assuming Elisa had already made her way home. To everyone's surprise, Elisa was still missing. Worried, Gildo ventured into the town center in search of his sister. Despite the crowd near the church, Elisa was nowhere to be found. By 2 p.m., when Gildo and Elisa had still not returned, the rest of the family decided to return to Potenza to investigate the situation. They were shocked to discover that Elisa had gone missing. Gildo turned to Eliana for a detailed account of his sister's activities that morning. It was during this conversation that Eliana admitted she had not been entirely truthful. They had not attended the church services planned. It had merely been an excuse for Elisa to meet with a 21-year-old dental technician student named Danilo Restivo. Despite coming from a respected family, Danilo was often the subject of ridicule, particularly from girls. Elisa, being a compassionate person, sympathized with him. However, she had made it clear that there could be no romantic involvement between them. On that particular day, she reluctantly agreed to meet him due to his insistence on presenting her with a gift to celebrate her success in passing her exams. Elisa and Danilo made arrangements to meet at the church precisely at 11:30 a.m. As the service concluded, Eliana patiently waited outside and unexpectedly bumped into another friend, Angelica. Unaware of Elisa's departure from the church, the girls assumed they had simply missed her amidst the bustling crowd. Since Danilo was the last person to have seen his sister, Gildo contacted him at home, demanding an explanation. Danilo clarified that their meeting lasted a mere 15 minutes, during which they conversed while seated at the altar. Subsequently, Elisa left the church while Restivo remained behind to engage in prayer, marking the final instance he laid eyes on her. Concerned by Elisa's prolonged absence, her brother Luciano personally visited Restivo. Danilo appeared visibly anxious and evasive in his responses. Luciano observed a substantial bandage on Danilo's left hand and inquired about its cause. Restivo explained that he had tripped at a construction site, resulting in the injury, reiterated his lack of knowledge regarding Elisa's whereabouts. Elisa's family promptly reported her disappearance to the police, urging them to question Restivo. However, their plea was dismissed, and they were advised to return home and await Elisa's reappearance. Faced with uncertainty, Gildo returned to the church, only to find the door locked. He arranged for access and thoroughly searched the premises once more. Behind the altar, he discovered another locked door leading to the church's upper floor. Gildo requested access to this door as well, but was informed that only the priest, Father Domenico Sabia, possessed the key. Unfortunately, Father Sabia had departed for a spa resort for a few days. 2 days later, with still no news of the girl, the police finally interviewed Danilo. He claimed that Elisa was discontented at home and expressed a desire to flee to Naples. Although he attempted to dissuade her from pursuing this idea, he maintained his account that she left the church after their brief conversation while he remained behind. The mention of the gift for Elisa was omitted by him, but he did mention seeking her advice about another girl named Paula whom he wanted to go out with. After their conversation, he made his way home through a construction site where he had previously been with Paula a few days ago. Unfortunately, he had a fall from an unfinished escalator and ended up cutting his hand. The detectives had doubts about the truthfulness of Danilo's statements for a few reasons. Firstly, he seemed surprisingly precise in his accounts. Secondly, there was no evidence to suggest that Elisa had any intentions of running away from her loving family. Lastly, it was unclear how he managed to only injure his hand and not break his glasses after falling head first from the under-construction escalator. The police decided to visit the Restivo family's residence and requested to see the clothes that Danilo had worn on that particular day. However, Danilo's father refused to cooperate without a warrant. As a result, the police left empty-handed, convinced that Restivo was concealing something, and proceeded to check his name in the database. It was discovered that he had previously encountered legal troubles at the age of 14 when he assaulted other boys he was playing with. But that wasn't all. Several months ago, 3 female students who lived near his house accused him of stalking. He seemed to derive pleasure from instilling fear in girls by making unsettling phone calls to their homes, describing their attire or playing them terrifying music from the horror movie Profondo Rosso. Investigators were also informed about Danilo's peculiar habit of cutting strands of hair from strangers while using public transportation. Although the police had heard about these incidents, they unfortunately couldn't gather enough evidence to directly link Restivo to them. Meanwhile, news of Eliza Clapp's disappearance rapidly spread across the country, and the family received numerous prank calls from individuals claiming to have the girl and assuring her safety. The police dismissed most of these calls, but a few messages mentioning the sighting of a girl in a white Fiat Uno caught their attention. Elisa's friend, Angelica, disclosed that another admirer of hers, a 20-year-old named Eris Gega, was spotted in the city center on that particular day. Eris had recently arrived from Albania with his family. When questioned by the police, Eris denied being at the church and provided the names of friends who could vouch for his whereabouts. However, his friends not only failed to support his alibi, but also stated that he was indeed in the city center on the day Elisa went missing. Adding to the suspicion, Eris drove a white Fiat Uno, the same type of car that multiple witnesses claimed to have seen Elisa in on the day she disappeared. Furthermore, one witness identified Eris as the driver of that car. The doubts surrounding Eris' involvement intensified when Elisa's diary, which was missing several pages, was found. Forensic experts managed to reconstruct fragments of those pages and discovered that some words were written in Albanian. Eris was subjected to further questioning, during which his account changed multiple times. At one point, he even alleged that Danilo Restivo instructed him to deny their acquaintance. Eventually, Eris was charged with providing false testimony. In December, an anonymous call was made to the police, with the female caller claiming to have seen Elisa in Rome. According to her, Elisa had been assaulted and forced into a white Fiat Uno. Towards the end of the call, the voice pleaded, "Please help her and help me." The recorded call underwent analysis, yielding astonishing results. It was revealed that the caller was Eliana, whose inconsistent statements had long raised suspicions among investigators. Similar to Eris, she was charged with giving false testimony. Although the possibility of Elisa running away from home couldn't be entirely ruled out, detectives gradually reached the conclusion that the girl was no longer alive and that Danilo was responsible for her disappearance. He might have coerced other acquaintances of hers into providing false information to the police, but since there was no body, they had no grounds to charge him or any other suspect with anything other than false testimony. However, the Claps family firmly believed that influential individuals, including friends of Danilo's father and the priest from the church where Elisa went missing, were protecting the reputation of their daughter's killer. Father Domenico Sabia, in particular, prohibited anyone from entering the church premises and refused to allow a box to be placed inside the building where people could anonymously leave notes with information about Elisa despite other churches readily agreeing to it. He even attempted to deny any knowledge of Danilo, but this was quickly disproven when a photograph emerged showing them together on Danilo's 18th birthday. Based on all the evidence gathered, Danilo Restivo was eventually arrested for providing false testimony. He was found guilty and sentenced to 20 months in prison. After the trial, Gildo was astounded by the judicial system, questioning how someone could be convicted of false testimony without being compelled to reveal the entire truth. Nonetheless, Danilo served half of his sentence and was released as the police had no further charges against him. Ileana and Eris were not found guilty of perjury by the judge as they supposedly gave false testimony not to hinder the investigation but out of fear for their own lives. On the second anniversary of Elisa's disappearance in Potenza, various rumors circulated, such as her being in the clutches of the mafia, having a secret relationship with a priest, or being sold by human traffickers. The family faced constant harassment from individuals demanding money in exchange for information about the girl. Despite the challenges, Elisa's relatives actively encouraged public interest in the case, and with the rise of the internet, they established a website to provide updates on the investigation. On April 23, 1999, an email purportedly penned by Elisa surfaced on the website. In the message, she disclosed her departure from Potenza and disclosed her new residence in Brazil. Expressing remorse for the distress she caused her family, Elisa clarified that her departure was driven by unhappiness and was intended to be permanent. She emphasized that the email would serve as her final communication to her family. Despite Filomena's fervent hope that her daughter was safe and content, her sons harbored doubts, noting Elisa's departure without financial resources or travel documents. In a bid to uncover the truth, they enlisted the services of a private investigator to track the email's internet protocol address, only to ascertain that it originated not from Brazil, but from an internet cafe in Potenza. Cafe staff cooperated by providing a roster of patrons present on the day in question, revealing that Danilo Restivo was among them at the time the email was dispatched. Prompted by this revelation, Elisa's family promptly alerted the authorities and urged for Danilo's interrogation, suspecting his involvement in a scheme to mislead them into abandoning their quest for Elisa. Regrettably, they were informed that the investigative efforts had reached a standstill, leaving them with no further recourse. Bournemouth, a renowned seaside resort located on the southern coast of Britain, is situated approximately 2,000 kilometers north of Potenza. On the morning of November 12, 2002, the Barnett family's routine in Bournemouth commenced as usual. 48-year-old Heather Barnett diligently saw her children, 11-year-old Caitlin and 14-year-old Terry, off to school before returning home by 8:30 a.m. Heather's customary ritual included savoring her morning cup of tea before embarking on her work from home duties, specializing in crafting bespoke curtains, pillowcases, and similar items. This day proved no exception, with a steady stream of orders awaiting her attention. Upon returning from school a few hours later, and Caitlin were unsettled to find the front door unlocked. Their concern deepened as they knew their mother was home, evident from her parked car and the radio playing. Despite calling out to her, there was no response. Caitlin hesitated to enter the bathroom during their search, prompting Terry to join her. After knocking yielded no reply, they cautiously pushed the door open, revealing a harrowing scene, their mother lying on the floor, clearly the victim of a brutal crime. Terry swiftly called emergency services and guided his distraught sister outside to await the arrival of the ambulance and police. Coincidentally, a neighbor across the street was parking their car and noticed the two distressed children. Showing compassion, they invited the children into their home, providing reassurance and a sense of safety during the ordeal. Upon arrival, the police noted the absence of stolen items and signs of forced entry. It became evident that the crime transpired soon after the woman's children left for school. Luminol testing unveiled size 9 shoe prints, leading from the bathroom to the woman's workshop, abruptly vanishing midway. This suggested the perpetrator changed shoes, likely bringing clean footwear to swap after committing the crime. Moreover, fibers discovered on the woman's body indicated that the assailant had worn gloves during the incident. Every piece of evidence suggested meticulous planning on the part of the killer. They arrived prepared with a change of clothes, a hammer, a knife, and gloves. However, they overlooked one crucial item, a green hand towel bearing Heather's blood found on the workshop chair. Since it did not belong to the family and considering its location, it could only have been placed there by the perpetrator. It was likely used to wipe blood from their face and hands before changing clothes. However, the most compelling evidence emerged from the locks of hair discovered in the woman's grasp. Initially, the police suspected she had extracted a strand of the perpetrator's hair, but forensic examination unveiled a surprising revelation. The hair had been precisely cut with a sharp tool. Furthermore, While one hand held Heather's hair, the other hand contained hair belonging to another woman, adding a layer of complexity to the investigation. The detective's conversation with Caitlin revealed that their spare house keys had disappeared a week prior to the murder. Despite Heather's efforts to change the locks, suspicion fell upon their neighbor Danilo Restivo, who had recently visited to order curtains for his girlfriend. Known as Danny to the children, Danilo had relocated to Britain in May 2002 with his Italian partner Fiamma Marsango, whom he met online. They both resided directly opposite Heather Barnett's house. Upon immediate police arrival at the crime scene, Danilo provided an alibi, asserting attendance at classes in a computer center after taking a bus. His alibi appeared sound, bolstered by his bus ticket and the center's registration log. However, when an officer returned to collect DNA samples and inspect Danilo's footwear, they found his sneakers soaking in bleach. Despite his explanation of cleaning them, the detective seized the shoes, suspecting potential evidence tampering. Despite the sneakers not aligning with footprints found in Heather's house, Danilo's dubious behavior prompted further investigation, ultimately yielding a significant revelation after his name was run through a database. Restivo's prior involvement in a criminal investigation resurfaced dating back over a decade ago, in connection with the disappearance of Elisa Claps, a young Italian girl. Upon re-examination, investigators found Restivo's alibi to be less credible than initially portrayed. Alterations to his registration time in the computer center's logbook, from 1028 to 928, were executed clumsily, raising doubts. Although he possessed a bus ticket with the specified travel time, the possibility of him disembarking and returning to Heather's house remained plausible. Furthermore, surveillance footage captured a figure resembling Restivo crossing the road near Heather's residence at 9:24 a.m. Regrettably, due to poor video quality, precise identification proved elusive. Nevertheless, Restivo found himself once again at the center of suspicion, yet the evidence against him remained circumstantial. Collaboration with authorities in Potenza revealed Restivo's peculiar penchant for cutting locks of hair from unidentified girls, bolstering investigators' conviction regarding his potential involvement in the crime. In April 2004, law enforcement initiated surveillance on Danilo Restivo, uncovering another troubling pattern of behavior. Restivo frequented a secluded park near Bournemouth called Throop, where he would clandestinely observe girls jogging or walking their dogs from behind bushes. On May 12th, despite the warm weather, he was observed in the park wearing multiple layers of clothing, including waterproof pants, gloves, sunglasses, and a hooded sweatshirt concealing his face. His actions raised significant concern among police, who feared the potential for another murder. To maintain covert surveillance, uniformed officers approached Restivo under the guise of investigating car thefts in the park, requesting to inspect his belongings. During this encounter, police discovered what they described as Restivo's murder kit, containing a ski mask, scissors, gloves, wet wipes, garbage bags, and a large knife. Despite the alarming discovery, Restivo remained composed, offering an explanation that he had found the knife in the grass and intended to prevent children from harm. When questioned about his presence in the park, he claimed to be collecting insects for his pet lizard. Despite the plausibility of his explanation, police remained unsettled by his behavior. Faced with a lack of concrete evidence, investigators opted to shift tactics and solicit public assistance. Their objective was to identify the owner of the hair strands found in Heather's hand. Through a coordinated effort with the media in both Britain and Italy, authorities received numerous reports from girls who recounted incidents of having their hair cut in public transportation settings, particularly in Britain, since Restivo's relocation to Bournemouth in 2002. Although all the girls provided DNA samples, none matched the hair strand recovered at the crime scene. For a period, the investigation hit a standstill until 2007 when advancements in technology allowed for reanalysis of the hair strand. This new technique revealed that the hair belonged to a girl residing in the UK who had recently traveled to Valencia, Spain, and later to Tampa, Florida, before her hair was forcibly cut. Despite the detailed information obtained, efforts to locate the girl through public outreach proved futile. There remained a possibility that she was unaware of the investigation, but authorities feared she may have fallen victim to the killer's prior crimes. Despite this setback, scientific advancements eventually played a pivotal role. In 2009, forensic experts revisited the green towel from Heather's residence, leveraging advanced technology to separate Heather's blood from another individual's sweat and skin particles. While not conclusive, an expert estimated a mere 1 in 57,000 chance that the DNA belonged to someone other than Danilo Restivo. Furthermore, modern techniques revealed traces of blood on Restivo's sneakers insoles, suggesting blood on his socks when he donned the shoes. This supported the detective's theory of the perpetrator bringing a change of footwear. Unfortunately, the presence of bleach rendered DNA analysis impossible once more, thwarting a direct link between Restivo and Heather's demise. Restivo exhibited a keen awareness of potential incriminating evidence, taking precautions by changing attire, wearing gloves, and using bleach to erase bloodstains, demonstrating meticulous planning and strategic action. Thankfully, the authorities managed to charge Restivo with the murder of Heather before a shocking discovery was made in Italy. On March 17, 2010, an unexpected event occurred in Potenza. Workers were renovating the local church where Elisa had vanished years ago. The priest had passed away 2 years earlier and the attic door was left unsecured. 2 workers went upstairs, one inspecting the roof for damage while using a flashlight to light his way. It was then that he spotted something in the corner of the room, concealed behind construction debris. To his dismay, he realized it was a mummified body. The girl was identified by her shoes, glasses, and watch, all found on her remains. Elisa Claps was found in the very same church where she had disappeared 17 years prior. The forensic examiner later determined that she had died on the day she went missing, and her body had been moved and concealed. Evidence of violence was present on her body. Most damning proof was the various strands of hair found in her hands and near her body. A sample of foreign DNA discovered on her body was sent for analysis to a professor in Rome. However, due to his connection to the church where the crime occurred, the investigation was conducted carelessly. He claimed that the DNA did not match Danilo Restivo, yet upon reevaluation by another laboratory, the DNA sample was a match to Restivo's DNA. Professor was suspended from his duties for 18 months and Restivo was eventually apprehended on May 19, 2010. Following 5 hours of deliberation on June 30, 2011, the jury found Danilo guilty of Heather's murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole. Nevertheless, on November 21, 2012, he successfully appealed, resulting in the court altering his sentence for Heather's murder, a minimum of 40 years behind bars. On November 11, 2011, Restivo received a 30-year prison sentence for the murder of Elisa Claps, despite his absence during the trial. Given Restivo's clear inclination towards murder, investigators deem it crucial to delve into his potential involvement in other unsolved crimes in both Britain and Italy. The most probable connection lies in the death of a 27-year-old North Korean student who was studying English in Bournemouth. On July 12, 2002, just 2 months prior to Heather's murder, Jang Ok-shin was walking home after spending time with friends. She was a mere 3 blocks away from Restivo's residence when an unidentified assailant inflicted a fatal injury upon her. Ok-shin managed to defend herself by screaming and even informed medical personnel that the attacker wore a ski mask. Another man was convicted for this crime after 3 attempts, solely based on the testimony of a female informant who had previously provided false statements and often found herself intoxicated. Her account was riddled with contradictions and failed to mention the ski mask worn by the killer. The physical resemblance between the 2 girls supports the theory of Restivo's involvement. Furthermore, the fact that the crime occurred on the 12th of the month similar to the murders of Elisa and Heather, along with Restivo's visit to the park where his murder kit was discovered, suggests the significance of this date to him. The wound on Ok-shin's body matches the length of the knife found with Danilo in the park. Additionally, several strands of hair were found near Ok-shin, although a hair salon was nearby, making it challenging to definitively determine their origin. Legally, Ok-shin's case is considered closed, and Danilo Restivo has been officially charged with 2 murders. However, investigators firmly believe that there may be more victims. Elisa's body was meticulously concealed, while Heather was callously exhibited for her children to discover. Analysts suggest that this signifies a progression in the perpetrator, revealing an inability to cease his actions independently. Unlike conventional serial killers, he was viewed as an aberration, a madman who deviated from the usual characteristics of a ruthless, malevolent, unrestrained murderer. Rather, he was an individual who genuinely experienced regret and desire to be incarcerated indefinitely in order to avert harm to others. Despite his pleas for assistance, he received no response. The peaceful city of Ottawa, located in Canada, was shaken by a gruesome crime that occurred on May 3, 1975. The body of a woman, later known as the Nation River Lady, was discovered floating in the nearby Nation River. The detectives who arrived at the scene immediately recognized the signs of a horrifying homicide. Despite their best efforts, they struggled to uncover any substantial clues or evidence that could help identify the victim. As time passed, the case seemed destined to remain an unsolved mystery. However, advancements in technology decades later provided a glimmer of hope for a new generation of detectives. They embarked on a mission to unravel the identity of the Nation River Lady and uncover the truth behind her tragic fate. How did this woman end up in such a horrific condition in the river? The city of Ottawa, known as the cultural and diverse center boasts of numerous national museums, renowned art galleries, and vibrant annual festivals. It is widely regarded as one of the best places to live in Canada, offering a high level of safety and well-being for its citizens. In fact, Ottawa is recognized as one of the safest cities in the country according to the Crime Severity Index, with a crime rate significantly lower than the national average. However, the heinous crime that occurred in 1975 challenged this reputation, leaving detectives perplexed for years. On that fateful day, a farmer stumbled upon the lifeless body of a woman floating in the Nation River near a bridge crossing on Highway 417, just 60 kilometers east of Ottawa, Ontario. Witnesses immediately alerted the Ontario Provincial Police, who swiftly arrived at the scene and recovered the body. An intensive investigation was launched to uncover the truth. It was determined that the remains had likely been in the waters since either the previous fall or early spring of that year. The body had been tightly wrapped in various pieces of cloth, towels, and rags, with the hands and feet bound using nectos. The investigators determined that the woman had been strangled to death using a television cable wire before being disposed of in the water. An examination of the remains revealed that she was estimated to be between 25 and 50 years old, had dyed reddish blonde hair, and painted her fingernails and toenails pink. Despite numerous efforts to identify her, the investigators were unsuccessful. Consequently, she was designated as a Jane Doe and became widely known as the Nation River Lady. The detectives diligently investigated the case and scrutinized the evidence, but their efforts always reached a dead end. As a result, the investigation lost momentum and eventually went cold. In 2017, the Ontario Provincial Police reopened the Nation River Lady case and approached it from a fresh perspective. Collaborating with the Forensics Department, they created a 3D reconstruction of the victim, believing it would accurately depict her appearance. Over the following years, the police attempted to identify her using this 3D model, but their endeavors proved fruitless. Nevertheless, the detectives refused to give up on the case. In 2019, the Centre of Forensic Sciences in Toronto obtained a new DNA profile of the victim. This DNA data was then sent to a laboratory in California where it matched samples collected from 2 individuals listed in a family DNA tree. The detectives also collaborated closely with the DNA Doe Project, an organization dedicated to identifying victims in cold cases. In 2020, the organization uploaded the victim's DNA profile to genetic genealogy databases, leading to a breakthrough in the case. The DNA profile for the Nation River Lady was established and uploaded to the genetic genealogy databases at GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. After weeks of searching for matches on various sites and conducting a thorough investigation of the available records, the genetic genealogists at DNA Doe Project successfully identified Jewel Parchman-Lanford as a potential match. It was discovered that Jewel had gone missing around the same time the body of the Nation River Lady was found. Despite extensive efforts, Jewel was never located. Decades later, detectives began to suspect a connection between the two crimes and believed that the unidentified woman was, in fact, Jewel Parkman Lineford. Born on March 30th, 1927, in Tennessee, USA to parents Little Mitchell Parchman and Egla Mae Wilson. Jewel was the eldest of 5 siblings and was deeply loved and respected by her family. She grew up to become a well-known businesswoman in Jackson, Tennessee, where she owned the Jackson Health Club and Imperial Health Spa alongside her then-husband, Atlas Lanford, during the early 70s. Described as kind-hearted and down-to-earth, Jewel had a special bond with her niece, Denise Chung, despite not having any children of their own. Unfortunately, Jewel's marriage to Atlas faced difficulties, leading to their divorce in the mid-70s. Shortly after, Jewel met Rodney Nichols, a Canadian man, during his visit to the U.S. The two quickly formed a strong connection, prompting Jewel to make the decision to accompany Rodney to Montreal, Canada, where they planned to live together. Tragically, in June 1975, Jewel Parchman Lanford was reported missing by her family in Montreal, marking the last known whereabouts of the 48-year-old woman. When Jewel's family was unable to reach her for an extended period of time, one of her relatives made the journey to Montreal in search of her. However, despite their efforts, Jewel could not be located, prompting the family member to contact the Montreal police for assistance. The concerned relative informed the authorities that they had not heard from Jewel since April 1975 and expressed their worries about her well-being. In June 1975, Jewel's brother, Ronald Parchman, also reached out to the Montreal police, but unfortunately he returned home empty-handed, with no information about Jewel except for her Cadillac, which he brought back. It wasn't until August of 1975 that an official missing persons report was filed for Jewel. Once she was officially listed as missing, the Service de Police de la Ville de Montreal, also known as the SPVN, initiated an investigation into her disappearance. As part of their efforts, the detectives notified the media and other police forces about Jewel's case, hoping that someone who knew her might have information about her whereabouts. Although the detectives were able to establish a connection between Jewel's case and the Nation River Lady case in 2020, there was also investigation into Jewel's disappearance when she initially went missing in 1975. Just before her disappearance, Jewel had been residing with Rodney in his Montreal residence, making him a person of interest in the investigation. Rodney was brought in for questioning, but unfortunately, no valuable information was obtained from the interrogation. Following Jewel's mysterious vanishing in 1975, Rodney continued to utilize her Cadillac for personal use. During that time, Rodney was actively involved with the Westmount Rugby Club, where he held the position of team captain for several years. In order to gain further insight into Rodney's background, the detectives decided to conduct a thorough background check. This investigation revealed that Rodney was born in Middleton, Nova Scotia in 1942 to a Canadian couple who were stationed in the United Kingdom during the Second World War. In 1961, Rodney himself joined the British Army. According to a spokesperson from the UK Ministry of Defence, Rodney served in the Wessex Brigade for approximately 1 year but did not complete his training. Upon investigating his background, no suspicious information was found. Since there was no evidence linking him to Jewel's disappearance, the police released him from suspicion. Despite extensive efforts to locate Jewel, she was never found. The detectives found no leads to pursue. There were no reported sightings of her, and her bank account showed no signs of any financial activity. The police concluded that she had vanished without a trace, resulting in the case of Jewel's mysterious disappearance going cold. Several years after Jewel Lanford disappeared, she was officially declared dead in her hometown of Jackson, USA. Her family held a memorial service for her and laid her to rest in Highland Memorial Gardens, with a headstone bearing the inscription, "Missing but not forgotten." With a thorough examination of Jewel's case, the detectives knew their next steps. They contacted Denise Parkman Chung, one of Jewel's beloved nieces, and other family members, requesting their DNA samples to potentially solve this decades-old mystery. The family willingly provided their DNA samples, which were then sent for testing. Finally, in 2020, after 45 years, the body found in the Nation River, Ottawa, in 1975 was identified. The woman, known as the Nation River Lady for decades, turned out to be Jewel Parkman Lanford herself, the woman reported missing in Montreal in 1975. While DNA genealogy analysis had been successfully used in the United States to solve cold cases and identify unidentified remains for several years, this was the first time it was employed in Canada. The results of this technique were not only significant for Canada's law enforcement team, but also provided hope for solving numerous other cold cases. Jewel's case presented a unique scenario, as it involved both an unsolved murder and an unidentified victim, showcasing the intriguing application of DNA genealogy technology. The majority of Jewel's immediate family, including her siblings and parents, had long passed away. However, her mother, during her lifetime, tirelessly advocated for Jewel's case. She persistently reached out to the FBI for updates from the Ontario Provincial Police in Canada, fighting for her daughter until her final moments in 1996. Denise, Jewel's niece, had no knowledge that the detectives were still actively investigating her missing aunt until she was approached to provide a DNA sample for testing. In 2022, the investigators apprehended Rodney Nichols, an 81-year-old residing in an assisted living center in Hollywood, Florida, USA, as the perpetrator of Jewel's murder. Extradition proceedings were initiated against him. Nevertheless, the investigators refrained from disclosing the details surrounding Rodney's of each crime and the motive behind it. They believed that prematurely revealing developments in the investigation could compromise the case and subsequent legal proceedings, including potential extradition from the United States. Consequently, all progress in the case remained confidential until the Ontario Provincial Police issued an official statement. In September 2022, Rodney was formally charged at the Ontario Court of Justice in L'Original, Canada. When questioned about the absence of a connection between Jewel's disappearance and the unidentified Nation River lady, the detectives explained that establishing such a link was challenging at the time the crimes occurred due to the absence of DNA analysis techniques. Additionally, the involvement of two separate jurisdictions in different provinces further complicated matters, as the means of sharing information between police departments and regions were limited to telephone, fax, or mail. Former investigators who previously worked on the case believed that if they had connected the discovery of the unidentified woman's body with Jewel's disappearance back in 1975, the investigation would have had a significantly higher chance of success. Henry Rosenblatt, an acquaintance of Rodney, described him as an enjoyable individual to be around. He mentioned that Rodney was entertaining and had a vibrant social life. Henry recalled meeting Jewel a few times during the 1970s. According to Henry, Rodney introduced Jewel to him as his romantic partner. When Henry and some other friends inquired about Jewel's absence after a while, Rodney informed them that she had left him and he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. Henry was shocked when he heard the news of Rodney's arrest for Jewel's murder. Despite spending a considerable amount of time with them over the years, he had no inkling that Rodney was capable of such a heinous act. To Henry, the entire situation seemed completely out of character for Rodney. Finally, all of Jewel's surviving family members found solace. In March 2022, Jewel's remains were brought back to the United States with the assistance of Highland Memorial Gardens and George J. Smith and Sons Funeral Home. The family held a small ceremony and laid Jewel's ashes to rest. Her headstone bore the inscription, "Finally home and at peace." The family was grateful to have Jewel's ashes returned, and now that she was back home, they could peacefully move forward, cherishing Jewel's memory forever. Denise, Jewel's niece, was quite young when her aunt went missing in 1975, but she still held fond memories of her and shared them with the detectives. Dennis described Jewel as a joyful and compassionate person who always lent a helping hand to her community. Jewel took care of herself and ensured the well-being of her loved ones. She had a vibrant personality and a deep love for traveling. Dennis vividly remembered the times when Jewel would take her shopping and buy her anything she desired. Dennis and her father, who happened to be Jewel's brother, provided assistance to Jewel and Addis, who was Jewel's ex-husband during the construction of their house, frequently visited the house to spend quality time with her beloved aunt. However, when Jewel departed for Montreal, Dennis was left in a state of anguish. As she grew older, she was eventually informed about her aunt's sudden disappearance, which deeply shattered her heart. Nevertheless, gaining knowledge about what had transpired with her aunt brought Dennis a sense of closure. The current situation regarding Roni's potential arrest remains uncertain. Both the American and Canadian Departments of Justice have refrained from confirming whether an extradition hearing date for Roni has been established, citing confidentiality. Consequently, Jules' family, who have been patiently waiting for the past 48 years, will continue to seek further information and closure regarding Jules' untimely demise, although they find solace in finally knowing the truth about Jules' fate. They firmly believe that true closure can only be achieved once Rodney is incarcerated and facing the consequences of his actions. If the cases had been linked earlier, do you believe Rodney would have been apprehended much earlier? What could have driven Rodney to commit the heinous act of killing Jules? Today's case takes us to a country we have never been to before on one of our episodes, Pakistan. Pakistan is a fascinating country with some of the most breathtaking scenery you can find anywhere in the world. Pakistan has lived through social and economic difficulties, and its history is both extremely interesting and gripping. It's home to more than 200 million people, with more than 10 million people living in the city of Lahore, where this story takes place. Tuesday, the 9th of October, 2001. In Block 7 of the maximum security Kotlakpat jail, a guard was making the morning rounds, waking prisoners up at around 5 a.m. As he came to one of the cells, the prisoner was lying on the floor. The guard opened the cell door to check on him. The prisoner was not responding. He had clearly been dead for a few hours at this point. In a separate cell, the body of another prisoner was found. With the two prisoners now dead, it appeared to be the end of a case that had shocked Pakistan, but people were left with more questions than answers. Our story begins in 1999, as the dawn of a new millennium was approaching. In May of that year, General Pervez Musharraf had taken control of the government after a coup, and Pakistan's economy was struggling. The future for many seemed somewhat uncertain, as the daily struggle to make ends meet was widespread. In search of a better life, many people would leave their villages and head into the cities like Lahore. Every single day, people arrived in Lahore in search of a brighter future, hoping to find what the city had to offer them. Amongst those who go to Lahore are young boys who have run away from their homes, looking for something new. But the reality of life in the city is very different. What happens to many of these vulnerable children is awful. They are often targeted and exploited for cheap labor and also sexually abused. They fend for themselves in a place they don't know, without the security and safety of good adults around them to care for them. In late November 1999, for police in Lahore, their day had started as normal. When checking through the mail that had been delivered, a letter was found. Unfolding the paper, the words written on it were graphic and horrifying. It was a confession. The letter detailed the names of the victims and gave a minute-by-minute account as to what had happened to them and how they had met their deaths. Every grim detail was in there: how long it took to dissolve a body and how much the acid had cost him. He then gave the address for this alleged house of horrors, 16B Ravi Road. The Deputy Superintendent of Police, Tariq Kambo, took a couple of officers to 16B Ravi Road to investigate. After knocking on the door, the homeowner appeared. 38-year-old Javed Iqbal. The police quizzed him on the letter, asking for more details and if he knew anything about it. Javad quickly became unpredictable and volatile, grabbing a gun and saying he would take his own life if they didn't go away. So the police left. They didn't question him further, they didn't remove the gun, they didn't even go into the property. This man can't be a killer of 100 kids. He's a nutcase, Kambo said to the fellow officers. As they walked away from 16B, they had no idea that they had just encountered evil. They had walked away from Pakistan's worst serial killer. November 22nd, 1999. The package was delivered to the office of the Daily Jang, the oldest broadsheet newspaper in the country. It had been sent to the chief crime reporter, a man called Jamil Chishti. Upon opening the package, Jamil discovered a handwritten letter and a series of photographs. The read as follows. The parcel also contained the 32-page diary he had mentioned in the letter and a notebook, giving horrific and disturbing details of each murder. After going through the contents of the envelope, I thought there could be two possibilities. Either someone was trying to frame him or this man has really done it, Jamil would later say. He wasted no time and went straight to 16B, Ravi Road with one of his colleagues, the address that had been given on the letter. They climbed the wall and jumped over. The property had been abandoned and padlocked. After gaining entry, they found clothes and shoes piled up, alongside sleeping pills and children's board games. Several blue plastic barrels were also dotted around. This was a detail that had been mentioned in the letter. Both of them could smell something strange and unpleasant. All around the apartment, cards were pinned up on the walls, giving details of alleged victims and how they had been murdered. One card said that he saw himself as a type of vigilante, accusing the government of failing to act on crime. They decided to take the lid off of one of the barrels. Nothing could have prepared them for what they found. There, floating in an unknown liquid, appeared to be human remains. It appeared that the confession had been true. The newspaper decided to take the story to print, and on the 3rd of December, they ran the shocking headline, "Claim of Murder of 100 Kids." They printed the photos and names of 57 missing boys, who were now presumed murdered. The shoes and clothes that had been found were taken to the police station in order for them to be identified and linked to any of missing boys. Parents broke down in uncontrollable sobs as they recognized the clothes of their children. The police ran tests on the contents of the barrels and found that they contained a combination of sulfuric and hydrochloric acid. They had a confession, they had a detailed account of the murders, they had a crime scene, they had several bodies, but they had no suspect in custody. Javed Iqbal was on the run, and the largest manhunt Pakistan had ever seen was launched. It had now been a week since the letter and confession had been sent to the Daily Jang. 2 people were arrested after attempts had been made to cash checks that belonged to Javed Iqbal. They allegedly told the police that they were partners in crime and confessed to committing sexual violence against some of the boys that had been killed. The police still couldn't find Javed Iqbal, and the hunt was ramping up to find him. People were hopeful that he hadn't acted on his promise to end his life and that they would find him in time to bring him to justice. Another man called Ishaq Billah had also been arrested as an accomplice for allegedly being the one who had sold Javed Iqbal the acid. Just a few days later, on the 7th of December, Ishaq was being interrogated at the CIA headquarters in Lahore. During the interrogation, he jumped out of a window on the 3rd floor. He was killed instantly, and witnesses who saw this happen said he was not wearing handcuffs when he fell. It was reported that when a post-mortem was carried out, there was evidence to suggest that force had been used. 3 officers were arrested following his suicide and 2 senior officials were transferred. It was unclear as to whether or not they were amongst the 3 officers that had been arrested. With one of the alleged accomplices now dead, they needed to find Javed Iqbal sooner rather than later. As he had said, his plan had been to drown himself in the Ravi River. The police searched the river with nets, but nobody was found. Just as they were losing hope, the news would soon come in that they had been waiting for. 29th of December 1999, Javed Iqbal finally surrendered. He walked into the office of the Daily Jang and told the staff working there, "I am Javed Iqbal, killer of 100 children. I hate this world. I am not ashamed of my actions and I am ready to die. I have no regrets. I killed 100 children. I could have killed 500. This was not the problem. But the pledge I had taken was of 100 children, and I never wanted to violate this." Those working in the office were stunned. What was even more surprising was that he spoke to journalists there for the next hour, detailing how he had committed the murders and disposed of the bodies. Employees of the paper quickly contacted the authorities, and more than 100 soldiers soon had the building completely surrounded. When speaking with the journalists, the only pity he showed was towards himself, saying he was a victim of the police system, irregularities in the jail system in Pakistan, and injustice in other sections of society. He was swiftly placed under arrest. As the pieces of the puzzle were coming together, more and more was coming out about Javed and his disturbing past. He was the 6th child of a wealthy family. He had 4 sisters and 5 brothers. His father was a successful businessman, and both he and his wife doted on their son. He was spoiled and pampered, constantly told how brilliant and how intelligent he was compared to his siblings. Early on in his childhood, he showed signs of serious aggression. He would physically attack other children and would also kill animals. His brother said, as a boy he was violent and eccentric. He would give a lot of headache to our parents. Javad would go into a trance. Sometimes he'd wake everyone up in the middle of the night and ask us to line up behind him. It was like some spirit had possessed him. I really think he was possessed as a kid. According to his brother, if Javid wanted something and their father refused, he would threaten to harm himself until he got his own way. Upon leaving Islamia High School, he went on to attend Islamia College. He had an engineering business set up for him by his father, who also purchased 2 villas, and a steel recasting business was run from one of the properties. Whilst working, he employed young boys to work in the business, as it was cheaper to employ them. In 1983, after years of refusing to allow his parents to arrange a marriage for him, he announced he would be getting married to a bride of his own choosing. She was the older sister of one of the boys he knew. It was reported that this was orchestrated by Javad to stop the boy from leaving him. The couple would go on to have a daughter. His violence soon began to come to the surface again. He committed assault against the son of a well-known and highly regarded resident of the area, and the incident was taken to the elders. Javid confessed what he had done and signed a document, promising he would not do it again. Copies were printed of the document and put up around the area, and he visited 100 shops to apologize for his actions. He also set up a shop selling video games, the first one of its kind in the area. He offered lower rates for young boys or would give them things for free. One particularly insidious thing he would do would be to drop money on the floor near a boy. Once the boy had picked up the money, Javad would say his money had been stolen and that he needed to search everyone. Once he found the money on the boy who had picked it up, he would take him to a different room, saying he needed to perform a strip search. He would then brutally sexually attack the boy. Sometimes he would give the boy the money to keep as a so-called gesture of goodwill. People in the area quizzed him on why he only hired young boys. He said he was doing it out of the kindness of his heart, helping runaways and caring for them, adding that he loved them. Parents in the area stopped letting their children visit his shop, so he started both an aquarium and also a gym in a bid to get boys to go. Another one of his schemes was to set up a school with air conditioning called Sunnyside School. The school failed as parents refused to let their children attend. Another business was a shop that sold products at a discounted rate, but this too failed after just a few weeks. Not only was he wealthy, he also maintained good connections with the police and invested in a magazine called Anti-Corruption Crime, often praising the police for their work. During this time, he interviewed more than 20 officers about their lines of work and duty. He lied to his neighbors and said he was a high-ranking police officer who worked in an anti-corruption unit. He was acutely aware of how the legal system worked. He would later serve a 6-month stint in prison for rape against a boy, but even this did not make him afraid of the authorities or of being caught. In late 1990, a father filed a complaint with the police, alleging that Javad had raped his son. After the police failed to locate him, they arrested his father and 2 of his brothers, keeping them in prison for 7 days. Javad still refused to give himself up. On the 8th day of their detention, the police made another arrest. This time it was a boy who had been staying at Javad's house, and he too was taken to the police station. Just a few hours later, Javad Iqbal showed up. He verbally abused members of his family for failing to stop the police from arresting the boy before finally giving himself up to the authorities in exchange for the boy's release. It was later alleged that he had bribed the police and the parents of the boy who had filed the complaint in exchange for no charges being filed. His brother would later say in a documentary that the family had found out about Javid's pedophilia in 1991 after he had been taken into custody accused of raping 2 young boys. So disgusted by his actions, his wife left him and most of his family severed ties too. Javid would later remarry and have a son, but this marriage soon fell apart too. When his father passed away in 1993, few were left who would protect him. When he was next caught, he was beaten and thrown out of the area. However, with the passing of his father came an inheritance of 3 million rupees. In 1995, he began building a mansion in Rana town. He was a keen videographer, using his camcorder to capture all aspects of his life, including his home. The property was enormous, boasting a pool, wild animals, and a sprawling underground space. He continued his schemes to try and meet young boys. Another method he used was using children's magazines to find pen friends. He would receive photographs of these pen friends and would then shortlist them to the children he found attractive and actively engage with them. He would send presents and money, grooming them, trying to get them to send photographs of themselves or go and visit him. As his extravagant spending continued, he was no longer living within his means. His money was rapidly running out. In 1997, his finances were in serious trouble. So he sold his mansion and moved to a different part of the city. One of the boys that had been picked up by Javed Iqbal would manage to escape. He had run away from a small, poor village where jobs were hard to come by. He had boarded a bus to Lahore, hoping he would find a better life ahead of him. Javed approached the child while he was sitting in a park. He was carrying a postcard and told the boy he was a father looking for his son who was missing, and asked him to help in the search. Javed then took the boy back to his property, where he beat him and told him if he tried to escape, would shoot him. Whenever Javed left, the boy would be locked inside. Whilst held captive, the boy saw Javed bring other boys back, where they would be sexually assaulted and abused. On one occasion, Javed told the boy to take his clothes off. When he refused, he was beaten. The terrified child got undressed. Javed Iqbal then raped him. Located in Lahore is the Dutta Daba, the largest Sufi shrine in South Asia. Many of those in need go there as people often donate food for the needy. This was one of his hunting grounds, knowing there would be boys looking for food and shelter. In September of 1998, he was back at Dutta Daba. The boy who was still being held captive said that Javed had brought the youth back and taken him to his bedroom for a massage. Javed Iqbal would later rape him. The boy who was being held captive said that he and the 18-year-old slept on the floor. During the night, Javed was attacked. He was beaten with the butt of a rifle that had been found in the apartment. He alleged that the 18-year-old had carried out the assault. As the sound of screams echoed around the apartment, neighbors ran to investigate. They found Javed lying on the floor covered in blood, and the younger of the boys with a head injury. Javed Iqbal could not lie his way out of this one. Enraged, the neighbors threw him out of the village. Javed was unconscious in hospital for roughly 3 weeks. The assault resulted in a broken jaw and fractured skull. He was arrested on suspicion of rape, but was later granted bail. Nobody in his family would pay for his medical treatment, and his aging mother was trying to care for him, as he couldn't even walk without help. Clinical psychologist Akhtar Ali would later say that this incident was the turning point. Javed, someone who had been aggressive his whole life and was so accustomed to getting everything he wanted, had not been expecting aggression to be directed towards him. He was someone who was used to being in control. This attack was not something he was prepared to accept. In order to pay for his medical care, his assets were sold, something he was shocked to discover. His money continued to run out and he moved to 16B Ravi Road. His mother died a few months later after a period of ill health, and Javed was set on revenge. In February of 1998, another complaint was made that he had raped 2 young boys at gunpoint. His wealth and status meant he escaped justice yet again. In May 1999, his depraved killing spree would begin. 100 runaway boys would disappear in just 147 days. Javed Iqbal would later say that he had experimented with acids to find the best way of dissolving a body. He mixed 2 together and then murdered a boy before placing his body into the barrel of acid. Within 12 hours, the young boy's body had disintegrated. Following his staggering confession, the police would spend the next few days talking to the families of the children who had gone missing. There were heartbreaking scenes as parents flocked to the police station to look at the photographs and clothing that had been found in the house, their worlds crashing down when they realized their son was amongst the dead. Over the days that followed, 57 children had been identified from the photographs or clothes. A spokesperson for the police said, "Some of the children whose pictures or clothes were identified were among the city's poorest, some were beggars, and others were among the army of children in Pakistan who work on the streets selling things. Others had left home and never returned." Based on evidence that had been found in the apartment, the police were able to identify more than 80 boys. On the 18th of February 2000, Javed Iqbal was formally indicted. Murder charges were filed against him, a 17-year-old called Sajid, and 2 minors. They all entered pleas of not guilty. As he was escorted into court for the proceedings, more than a dozen police officers were required to surround him and stop him from being killed by the crowds of outraged citizens. The prosecution had 105 witnesses, 73 of which were family members of the children. The court also heard from handwriting experts and the driver of the rickshaw that one of Javed's employees had paid for to take the acid-filled barrels to the river. Throughout the court proceedings, Javed Iqbal's story continued to morph and change. He would say that the children were alive and that the clothes found in the apartment were all just second-hand ones that he had picked up. He would then later say he had committed the murders as an act of revenge for the injustice meted out to him. During the trial, Special Public Prosecutor Ashgar Rokhari argued that Javed's written confession was not only a key and valid piece of evidence, but that there were witnesses who could corroborate its authenticity, people who had seen him with young boys who had later gone missing. The amount of clothes and shoes that had been found at the property, that were then later confirmed to belong to the boys who had been reported missing, provided yet more weight to their case. The prosecutor also highlighted the previous allegations that had been made against Javed, allegations of rape and sexual abuse, highlighting a very disturbing pattern of behavior. During the trial, the defense lawyer threatened to step back and no longer represent Javed after he had received a call from an anonymous source warning him of the possible consequences of being his defense lawyer. The trial would last for 2 months and outrage from the public would often come to the surface outside the courthouse with people calling for Javed to be executed. 16th of March 2000. The courtroom was packed as the verdicts were read out. The 2 minors were convicted and received prison sentences for their roles. 17-year-old Sajid was also convicted and sentenced to death. Javed Iqbal was convicted of 100 murders. He was given 100 death sentences. The judge said that Javed Iqbal would meet the same fate that he had subjected his victims to. He told the court, however, the country's interior minister, Mohammedan Haider, said that the sentence was not permitted. Such punishments are not allowed. He said it would be taken to the High Court for a legal challenge. Javed Iqbal's lawyer also argued that the sentence was against Pakistan's constitution. The chief prosecutor supported the judge in this sentence, saying that Javed Iqbal was not a human, but a beast. His defense lawyer later confirmed he would appeal his sentence. His lawyer alleged that some of the children who were believed to have been murdered had returned home, and that the confession Javed had made was a false one originating from detective stories. He then argued that the false confession was also the result of trying to raise awareness of boys going missing and get the government to pay attention to the issue, despite the fact his handwriting matched the cards that were found in his apartment and detailed the murders. He appealed against his death sentence at the Lahore High Court, and after several months the High Court transferred it to another court, saying it did not come within their jurisdiction. While sitting in prison, Javed Iqbal met with a Canadian psychiatrist and author named Khalid Sahel. Javed told him, "Look here, in between my eyebrows you will see a sign. Most people have either a blank space or hair joining the eyebrows, but I have these 3 prongs. It is a star, a special sign from God." Tuesday, the 9th of October, 2001. In Block 7 of the maximum security prison, Javed Iqbal was found dead in his cell. Found dead in another cell was Sajid. It was initially reported that they had taken their own lives by ingesting poison, but this version of events would later be challenged. It was alleged by a prisoner that Javed and Sajid had taken their own lives between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. The prisoner also alleged that the guard on duty had said, "I was asleep when the incident took place." The prisoner stated that when the guard had woken up, he had observed the 2 men hanging in their cells using bedsheets tied to the iron bars, and that they had been taken down and then placed on the floor to look as though they were sleeping before leaving the cell without telling anyone. When the guard was replaced, the new guard failed to check on the prisoners, and it wasn't until morning that the head warden found the pair dead in their cells, after he had gone to wake them up. It was reported that for the police investigators this story was odd. For 2 prisoners to take their lives in this way at the same time was unusual. In a bid to ascertain exactly what had happened, a magistrate, doctors, police and seniors from the prison descended on the scene. The bodies were taken away from the prison and sent to the city mortuary. According to the doctors, their necks were found to have strangulation marks on them, and blood had come out of their nostrils and mouths. On Javed Iqbal's body, they found many wounds that had healed, wounds that had been inflicted with a blunt weapon, and they were found across his body. Despite the indications of another person or persons being involved in their deaths, they were officially ruled as being suicides. Javed's lawyer Faisal Najib Chowdhury spoke to the BBC and said he was unconvinced by the official version of his client's death and was still waiting for the results of the postmortem. One of the officials from the prison had called Javed Iqbal's behavior whilst in jail strange, adding that he had made more than 12 attempts to end his life. Following the deaths of the 2 inmates, 6 officials were suspended. Javed's family refused to collect his body from the mortuary, with his brothers saying the day he had made his confession was the day he had died to them. The story of the case would later be made into a film. It was announced in 2021 that Javed Iqbal, the untold story of a serial killer, would be coming out. The day before it was scheduled to be released, the Central Board of Film Censors pulled it from cinemas, citing objections to it from the public. However, many expressed their disappointment over the decision to pull the film. Following changes and edits, it was announced it would be released in Pakistan on May 19, 2022. The impact of this case cannot be understated. It is a story that has captured and horrified people in equal measure for more than 20 years. The horror, brutality, and scale of it all lingering in the public consciousness. For the loved ones left behind, knowing the appalling deaths these boys were met with is crushing. Knowing that so many had gone missing and nobody had noticed. Knowing that there had been opportunities to catch and properly punish him. His crimes against children, but these had either been missed or had no impact, a thought that are too awful to comprehend. There are now 100 families that are missing their sons, grandsons, brothers, nephews, and cousins. For many of these boys, hopes and dreams of a better life in the city were cruelly and brutally snatched away. Words almost seem futile when trying to wrap up a case like this, but the least one can do is think of these boys and their families and hope that such atrocities never, ever happen again. We begin today's case in northern British Columbia, Canada, back to the hot summer of July 2019. Northern British Columbia is a scenic and beautiful place that extends up to the Yukon-Alaska border and is surrounded by forests, valleys, volcanic rock formations, and mountains. A place where you can see anything and do everything, from hiking and fishing to skiing and wild and open water swimming. One young couple taking full advantage of all that British Columbia had to offer was the free-spirited and adventurous 24-year-old China Deese and 23-year-old Lucas Fowler, who were on a much-anticipated mini-break together. Lucas came from a big family in Sydney, Australia, and was the son of a New South Wales chief inspector. He found his main passion in life at a young age, traveling, and as he got older he wanted to see as much of the world as he could. Hiking, camping, surfing, swimming, you name it, Lucas wanted to do it. It was this excitement for adventure that saw him embark on a 2-year backpacking trip around the world. This would include spending time in Croatia, and it was here in 2017 he would meet his future girlfriend China Deese from North Carolina. She had studied in Europe and worked on a grape farm, saving up as much as she could, and in just a few years she had visited 13 countries. Safe to say they were the perfect match and were in sync right away. Their families both loved each other and recognized that this was a relationship that would go the distance. They were full of happiness and joy just being together, Lucas's father Stephen said. The day she stole Lucas's heart, she became a part of the family. We were so happy he had met a life partner. China and Lucas spent as much time as they could together, despite the huge distance between them, and would talk for hours on the phone, reminiscing about their past trips and excitedly planning their future ones. In the 2 years they were together, they spent time in Central and South America, Japan, and Southeast Asia. The couple spent Christmas together in America with China's family, before Lucas left to work on a ranch in British Columbia. Now that he had a visa, it meant that the 10,000 miles between the pair wasn't quite so big and scary anymore, and much more feasible to work around. China soon joined him for a short holiday out there, and it was here that the pair made a plan to road trip through Canada together over the coming summer. They wanted to see as much as possible on the journey, and their final stop would be Alaska. Lucas spent time doing up his 1986 blue Chevrolet minivan in preparation, and he and China couldn't wait for the break, doing what they loved most together. On the evening of July 13th, with the trip now several days underway, the couple pulled into a gas station in Fort Nelson, British Columbia. CCTV showed them embracing, content and without a care in the world, before filling up their van and cleaning some of the windows. They paid and drove off. China, who had been texting her mother Sheila quite regularly, sent a message saying, the following day, however, about 200 miles away, they hit a bump in the road. Their van broke down along the Alaska Highway, known as Highway 97, near a popular tourist area, Liard River Hot Springs. A fellow tourist named Charles noticed the broken-down van and stopped to help, but Lucas was happy and chatty and assured him it was all under control. He said they would carry on trying to fix it, but if they had no luck, they would call a tow truck in the morning when they could get some phone service. Charles told them he was going to be camping about 3 miles away and would come back in the morning to check on them. He left them sitting on the side of the road, eating some food and happily embracing the situation that would likely stress most people out. At about 11:30 that night, with the couple still stranded and working on the vehicle, a road maintenance worker drove past. She saw a man with a beard talking to China and Lucas and described him as seeming frustrated, and the conversation appeared heated. She didn't stop, but she said something about seeing that encounter gave her a bad feeling. "If you just get a bad feeling, and that's what I had, you just don't stop," she later said. She recalled that both of the right doors of the couple's van were open, and it looked as if the man with the beard had come from a gray car nearby, but she couldn't be sure. July 15th, 6:20 a.m. A trucker going down Highway 97 spotted something in the distance that instantly caught his eye. As he pulled closer, he realized what it was he was looking at. It was the bodies of China and Lucas. They were face down in a ditch about 10 feet from their van and about 15 feet from each other. They were both cold to the touch and had been dead for some time. He called someone over to help and started frantically trying to redirect traffic and stop people from driving through. The police were now receiving multiple calls about this, and when they got to the scene at 7:20 a.m., they found the same trucker still doing his best to control the situation, but clearly distraught and very traumatized at what he had driven into. China and Lucas had been shot to death, and the medical examiner confirmed both entry and exit wounds. The van's back doors were open and the window was smashed. Nearby was 5 spent shell cases and China's phone. Lucas' phone was not found. Just after 9 a.m., Charles, the other tourist that had talked with them the day before, kept to his promise and drove back to check on them. When he was met with police blocks in the road, he simply couldn't believe this had happened. As word started to travel, the witness from the previous day gave the description of the man with the beard she saw talking to the couple. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police released a composite based on this and asked for anyone with dashcam footage to please come forward. Back in Australia, the news had also hit hard, and police over there offered their support to the Canadian authorities. Not only had they lost Lucas, but his father Stephen was a serving police officer, and they wanted to help him as much as they could. Another driver would then ask to talk to the police and told them that he had pulled over at the side of the road in the same area to take a quick nap. He said within 5 minutes of being parked, a small van drove past him and stopped about 50 yards ahead. A man got out of the passenger side holding a rifle. He then started quickly moving towards him, holding the gun in a way the witness described as a hunting stance. The truck then started moving slowly towards him too. The driver put his foot down and sped off, fearing for his life. He couldn't see their faces and didn't want to stop to look. 5 days later, on the 19th of July, another disturbing scene would unfold 300 miles away. Near Dease Lake in British Columbia, a burnt-out camper van was found. The number plate was still intact enough to run through the database, and it came back as belonging to 19-year-old Cam McLeod, who had been out on a road trip with his best friend, 18-year-old Bria Smijelski. Cam and Bria were both from Vancouver Island and were colleagues at a Walmart. They had both recently quit, deciding to go to Yukon for work. They had left their homes on the 12th of July, a trip their family had described as a spur-of-the-moment one, but they were supportive nonetheless. The last anyone had seen of them before the van was found was when they had stopped for coffee at a place called Jade City, somewhere that was happy to offer a free coffee to drivers passing through. The owner of the store remembered them coming in, but said there was nothing unusual about their stop and they didn't seem to be in any distress or trouble. And now they were both missing, and their truck was burned and destroyed. To add more to the already unnerving story, about a mile away from the teens' burning van, the body of a man who had also been shot was found. He had no ID on him, so police released a sketch and description. He was believed to be in his 50s or 60s and had a big gray beard. Although this was a nearly 8-hour drive from where Lucas and China were found, was it possible that all these cases were connected? As authorities continued to look for the missing teens, the families of China and Lucas both flew in, faced with the unthinkable task of bringing their bodies home. Alan Spigelski, Breyer's father, said the last he had heard from his son was a text message, saying that contact would likely be scarce due to a lack of phone service. When he saw his son's and Cam's faces on a paper, only then did he realize they were both missing. Cam had last made contact with his family on the 17th of July, saying he and Breyer had made it to Yukon, which was their intended final stop. So what had made them carry on so far past it? Or had they actually even made it there in the first place? There were so many questions. In the space of just a few days, 3 people had been killed, and 2 were now missing under deeply concerning circumstances. As the sketch of the 3rd victim started circulating, a woman named Helen called in. She was the wife of 64-year-old Leonard Dick, and she thought the sketch looked just like him. Leonard had gone camping a few days before, something he did a lot, and up until the evening of July 18th, he had been texting Helen and his children constantly, but she hadn't heard from him since then. Although DNA testing needed to be carried out, they now felt strongly that this was the man. Leonard was described as a caring husband, attentive father, and a cherished lecturer, teaching botany at the University of British Columbia. His students loved him and found him fascinating, saying his passion for teaching and how much he loved what he spoke about inspired them to want to learn more. He had a dry and witty sense of humor that kept everyone entertained, and as well as his job, he enjoyed drawing, writing short plays and poems, playing guitar, and of course, the great outdoors. Despite the fact he was often presenting to huge groups at a time, his family said he could be surprisingly quiet and very private. Hence the reason he loved his solo camping trips so much. He had just celebrated his 64th birthday, and on the 16th of July, he had packed up a small camping stove, some food and a tent, and had driven off in his Toyota RAV4. Excited to explore more and learn as he went, he told his wife he wanted to find and photograph some grizzlies and teach himself about the wildlife. On July 21st, some CCTV from Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan came in, and this would change everything. Cameras had picked up none other than a gray 2011 Toyota RAV4, and inside of the car was Cam McLeod and Brian Smigelski, the 2 missing teenagers. More footage showed Cam and Brian buying some black tape which they put over parts of the car, seemingly in an attempt to disguise it in some way, although of course this didn't work. It was quite clearly Leonard's car. A few days later, with it now safe to do so, a proper search of the burnt-out camper van was carried out. Officers found rounds of ammunition that matched what was found at both crime scenes. Just after this, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police issued a bombshell statement that the public had not been expecting. The 2 teens that everyone was out looking for, praying to find them safe and well, were actually the suspected killers of China, Lucas and Leonard. Cam had a possession and acquisition license, and before they had left Vancouver Island, they had purchased an SKS semi-automatic rifle and 20 rounds of ammunition. It turned out that just before the press release announcing that the pair were now wanted, Cam and Breyer had actually been stopped by First Nations safety officers doing a routine alcohol check in Split Lake, Manitoba. With no alcohol found on them, they were let go and sent on their way. The safety officers had no idea the announcement that was to come, and by the skin of their teeth, the teens had narrowly evaded being caught and detained. Where they were now was anyone's guess. A day later, on July 23rd, a local man called Billy Beardy and his wife Tamara actually located the Great Toyota near Fox Lake Cree Nation, north of a place called Gillam in Manitoba. This vehicle was also on fire, just burning away in the woods. Next to the car were some half-eaten pork chops, pots and pans, orange peels, keys, matches, and various tools. As suspected, the car's number plate was linked to Leonard Dick, and DNA tests soon confirmed. Just as his wife Helen had feared, Leonard was most definitely the third victim. 2 days later, arrest warrants were issued for the two, and named as official suspects in the deaths of China and Lucas as well. The search for the pair, which had actually started almost 2,000 miles away across 3 provinces, suddenly descended on the small town of Gillam, close to where Leonard's car had been found by Billy and Tamara. Gillam has a population of less than 1,500 people and only one road going in and out. It was here that the police set up their base. The whole area was put on lockdown, and officers told residents to be wary to keep their doors locked day and night, and to only leave the house if necessary. Search parties also found out into the surrounding areas, combing through everything as meticulously as possible. Alan, Breyer's father, then heard on the news that not only was his son missing, but he was actually a suspect in a string of awful crimes. My heart just sank. I told myself there's a mistake, there's got to be a mistake, he recalled. Cam's girlfriend then contacted the police and told them that he had sent her a text message on the 13th of July telling her he would not be returning home. It was a very cryptic and unexpected message. The police presence in Gillam was immense, and they felt strongly that without a vehicle and with the whole world now watching, they were probably in this area and laying low. The mayor said the town had gone from seeing maybe 2 or 3 police officers over a couple of days to hundreds patrolling the streets morning, noon, and night. Billy said it was tough to see so much police presence there when the car had been found in Fox Lake, Cree Nation. His small and scared community didn't even have working streetlights, let alone the authorities' support. At the end of July, however, police announced that they were pulling a lot of the resources that were going into the hunt, calling it a phased withdrawal. By this point, the search had been going on for about a week. Police had searched almost 4,000 square miles, followed up on over 1,000 tips, knocked on over 500 doors, including those of the teens' parents, and had even been working with the military. There were drones, helicopters, crisis negotiators, dogs, and hundreds of people involved in the searches. Alan said he believed his son was in a lot of pain mentally and wanted to die in a confrontation with the police. They're going to go out in a blaze of glory. Trust me on this, that's what they're going to do, he said. The families of both teens were begging them to come home and turn themselves in so they could deal with whatever had happened together. Just as resources and teams started being pulled, police got 2 more tips. Some members of the Bear Clan Patrol, a First Nations neighborhood watch group, said they had spotted whom they described as 2 tall, slender individuals digging around near a landfill before they ran away into the woods. But this was in York Landing, almost 80 miles away from where everyone was looking. The mayor of Gillam said that if they had actually made it all the way there, he was almost impressed, as would be pretty impossible to do without being caught. But after looking, police said they couldn't substantiate this claim. Billy Beardy was now involved with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in a big way and was almost spearheading the searchers, guiding them on where to go and leading the way. When authorities realized just how knowledgeable Billy was when it came to the area and the terrain, they knew they had to use it. The team started going back along the Nelson River by boat, and it was here that they found Cam's backpack with a box of ammunition inside, along with his wallet and some clothes. They also located a toiletry bag belonging to Leonard and a sleeping bag. Billy pointed out that the water was so fast-moving and there were so many swells, these items definitely hadn't just washed up there. They had been dumped there, indicating that the pair were still on foot but likely slowing down and struggling. They were clearly getting rid of excess weight and baggage as they were becoming more tired and hungry, fighting a tough terrain that was teeming with insects and bears, and filled with swampy areas that you could sink into very quickly, all this only being exacerbated by the sweltering heat. Billy said that if you went into some parts without any help or knowledge, the land would not forgive you and it could prove fatal. Some parts were so inhospitable and treacherous, even the locals wouldn't dream of venturing out. It is really hard to comprehend just how expansive, dense, and dark so much of this area is, and although police admitted it was simply not possible to get the manpower to search every single part of it, they did seem to be closing in on them, given the clues they were finding. On August 2nd, as helicopters and drones slowly flew back over the Nelson River, A small and damaged boat was spotted along the shoreline. The teens were still praying they would turn themselves in and be found safely, with Cam's dad saying, "We try to wrap our heads around what is happening and hope that Cam will come home to us safely so we can all get to the bottom of the story." But Alan said he was now coming to terms with the situation at hand. Billy was still in charge of operating the jet boats, and with a team of Royal Canadian Mounted Police on board, they went down the river for a final time. Whilst out in the water, Billy spotted a raven jump in a riverside ravine. This caught his attention immediately, as he knew this indicated some sort of carcass had to be around for it to be feeding on. "Any kind of bushman knows that if there's a raven there, he's eating something," he said. Billy knew in his guts that they needed to focus more of their attention in this exact area. And on August 7th, 2019, exactly where Billy stopped the boat and saw the raven, authorities found 2 bodies. Near the creek, just off from the Nelson River, amongst some bushes, were the bodies of 19-year-old Cam McLeod and 18-year-old Briar Schmegelski. Almost 2,000 miles from where it had all started on the highway, the hunt had finally come to an end. Billy then spent the next 13 hours going back and forth, bringing all the police and experts in and out by boat. Officers admitted they really would have been lost without him. The medical examiner couldn't exactly say when the pair had died, but they determined that Cam had shot Briar before shooting himself in what they believe was a pact. Next to Cam's body was one of the rifles, and the other was still loosely in his grasp. A digital camera actually belonging to Leonard was also found nearby. It had 6 videos and 3 images on it, which included one of Briar posing with one of the semi-automatic rifles, and a selfie of Cam. In the first video, both teens took responsibility for all 3 murders, but gave no motive as to why they had done it. In the second video, Briar talks to the camera and explains that they have reached the Nelson River, intending to take the boat out and flee, but because the current was so strong, he said they may have to kill themselves. Cam agreed, and in the third video, they seemed to change their mind and said they planned to kill more people by taking the boat and going to Europe or Africa and carrying on their killing spree there. The other videos, however, went back to their plans to take their own lives and expressing their desire to be cremated if they were found. Police described the videos as cold, remorseless, and matter-of-fact. Briar's father, Alan, said he wanted to see the videos for himself and said he just couldn't believe that this had all happened. Police said it didn't appear that either one of them was the driving force or the ringleader. It seemed they were both equal and willing partners in everything they were doing. Despite the public and media asking questions, and Alan asking to see the tapes, detectives have never released them. They believe that Cam and Briar may have made the videos for notoriety, and releasing them would be seen as an insult to the victims. According to sources, there were some red flags. Friends said that Briar was obsessed with Hitler and the Third Reich and purchased lots of memorabilia. He also had a fascination with guns from a young age. Alan said although this had left him deeply upset and riddled with guilt, he also recognized that his son needed professional help. He described Briar's early life as troubled, and when Alan and his wife Deborah had divorced, this had affected his son a lot. He recalled that he took solace in YouTube and video games, seldom communicating or sharing his feelings, becoming slowly more and more introverted. Briar would often say to his friends when playing shooting games, "What if this was real? Can you imagine if this was real?" Getting very excited about this idea in a way his friends never were and found odd. Cam's family said they couldn't believe this was the quiet, polite, and kind young man they all knew. Helen, Leonard's wife, said, "The family should not feel guilt for the way they raised their boys. It has nothing to do with that. It's those boys' decision to take lives. And why they decided to do that, it isn't important. What's important was that they did it, and I feel they'll face the consequences of that. I think they did at the end." For nearly 3 weeks over the summer of 2019, what would be one of Canada's largest nationwide manhunts had gripped not only the locals, but the rest of the world as well. An extensive search covering thousands of miles that ended just as mysteriously as it had started, with no motive, no reason, no answers, and no closure for anyone. No one will ever know how everyone happened to come into contact with each other and what took place when they did. Billy Beardy, who had been so vital in helping bring this case to a conclusion, would later be honored by the Keewait and Tribal Council for his contribution to the search efforts, with people calling him a pillar of the community. He was presented with a star blanket and an eagle feather. Every patch on the quilt represents a person, and it means you are surrounded by those who love, support, and will protect you. Billy's wife said she was so proud of him, but was sad that he hadn't been treated like one of the team. He had been out there day in, day out, with no protection, safety gear, or life jacket, and he could very easily have lost his life in trying to help. The lead investigator acknowledged this and apologized. In October 2019, Billy was elected chief of Fox Lake Cree Nation and was also later honored by the Gillen Royal Canadian Mounted Police. One has to wonder if he hadn't spotted the raven, recognized what it meant, and turned the boat back around, how much longer the search for the teens would have gone on for, and if they would ever have been found at all. It is a senseless case that still grips people to this day, and one that will leave everyone guessing and clutching at nothing but speculative thoughts and ideas. The Assistant Commissioner Kevin Hackett said it was one of the most dynamic and unpredictable cases in his memory, which brings today's episode to somewhat of a conclusion. Doris, Leonard's sister, said if there was anything positive to come out of her brother's death, it would be all the people coming forward to speak about how much he had impacted their lives. She took comfort in that, even though she knew the ever-private and humble Leonard would have hated every bit of the attention. China's mum Sheila said she would look at the CCTV of them in the gas station all the time. I watched that video over and over. I kept seeing new things and watching that embrace that they had. I could hear them saying, "Let's do this, here we go," saying it was their purpose to travel the world together, and what they had seen and done at such a young age was remarkable. The families, friends, and loved ones of China, Lucas and Leonard, described the loss as profound. They hoped that everyone will remember them for the kind, giving, and adventurous way in which they loved to live, and not for the awful ways in which their lives so cruelly came to an end. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.